Hey, what's up, comrades? It's Dan. The seasons are changing. The crisp fall air fills with the scent of falling leaves. Golden pumpkin spice lattes fill our chilled hands. I just can't wait. Every action has an equal opposite reaction. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital because of an unforeseen reaction with my liver medication. While gone, I wasn't able to send my Cobra payments on time, and my coverage lapsed. Now, I owe Texas Health Resources $237,000 in medical bills. So, yeah, I've become radicalized. Do you regret the value you once placed upon compromise? Are you sick of debating against the absolute conviction of the ignorant? Have you come to a sudden and inexplicable interest in the robust simplicity of Soviet weapons? Then I've got a game that will help you purge those unhealthy, antisocial thoughts and consign them safely within the realm of fantasy. Freeman Guerrilla is a fantastic game. The love child of Jagged Alliance 2 and Mountain Blade, the game is a bundle of fun. And while both parents are fundamentally disappointed by the consequences of failed contraceptives, the intersection is a ton of fun even if it doesn't escape the shadow of its parentage. I had to uninstall this game while producing this review. I couldn't stop playing it. I condensed this down from close to 40 hours of footage. I love this game. Freeman Guerrilla is a single-player sandbox shooter with a unique focus on battlefield tactics. I fucking love this game. I love taking scalps. I love recruiting my squad and leading them to glory. I love playing dress up with my soldiers. The game may be a one-trick pony, but it's a really good trick. It's like ordering a gas station pizza. They don't get points for the firmness of their gorgonzola. The game lacks some dimension. Like all games tend to be anymore, it's a work in progress, so it helps to see the current product from a distance, to see the ideal as opposed to the fact. Still, there are plenty of missed opportunities. The game scales poorly, it's clunky, buggy, and often awkward, but only rarely does that interfere with my ability to have fun. So with optimistic eyes, you can enjoy the game for what it is. In the apocalyptic wasteland of late-stage capitalism, all goggles are rose-colored. Freeman contains a lot of good ideas, though some aren't fully baked and others are implemented poorly. The parts of the game that are good are really fucking good. The parts of the game that aren't so good mostly feel underproduced as opposed to outright bad. It's best to think of this game as a tech demo for a sequel. Now, I suck at first-person shooters, and I typically don't like them, mostly because my mouse is a trackball I liberated from my employer back in 1998. First-person shooters are a young man's game, but Freeman is attractive to me because it isn't a first-person shooter, not entirely. It brings a lot of new ideas to the genre, making for a fun experience that's the perfect companion to the soul-crushing despair of job hunting during a pandemic. Recruit a militia and wander the earth. Kill everyone you encounter while you chase money. Conquer territory and destroy the status quo. Kill everyone who opposes you. Then kill the survivors. But the best part of the game is the gear fetish. And I do mean fetish. Any liberty-loving, God-fearing man would love this game. At its most superficial layer, Freeman is a first-person shooter with campaign and RPG elements. The layer of tactical control lets you test your tactical brilliance in 3 exciting battle types: encounter battles, attack, and defense. At the strategic level, you can enter into alliances, make trade agreements, develop your territory, stack the corpses of your rivals into an altar where you pray for guidance on who dies next. There's gear, quests, guns, money, bitch. You take on the role of a modern-day George Washington, destined to unite the tribes and throw off the yoke of a foreign power, or as I call him, Muad'Dib. Recruit your loyal Fedaykin death commandos. Ride the worm. Your destiny calls. While your goal is to conquer the island because of plot, it's just expensive. Making money is ultimately the most immediate and persistent roadblock you'll encounter. And unfortunately, at the start of the game, you're so weak you don't have a lot of options to make money. But like every youngster with more guns than options, with a couple of buddies and a hand-me-down AK, you set off on your quest to glory the old-fashioned way. Fucking murder. The game tells you who your enemy is right out of the gate, so find somebody weaker than you are, run them down and execute them in cold blood like the dog they are. Claim their water, strip their corpses and sell their shit. It's rags to riches out here, and all I see are bitches. Early gunfights are a lot of fun and are pretty challenging in a way that feels like authentic combat. It's hard to describe, but it feels realistic. Everything's just a little shitty. Guns have recoil, it's hard to aim, and your starting weapons are puny. This isn't Call of Duty, there are no 360 no-scopes. The best you can do is a combination of suppressing fire and flanking maneuvers. Engaging at less than maximum range is typically foolish. Your impact on the battlefield is real, but you have to be properly supported. Running and gunning is difficult. Taking aim shots is hard and exposes you, so you spend a lot of time sighting along tree lines looking for movement. The tactical layer is where most of your potential can be seen. Combat is just clunky enough to give a real sense of satisfaction when you accomplish something noteworthy. Again, I suck at first-person shooters, but only once have I personally scored a double-digit body count. I was alone, cut off from the main force of my advance. I followed the lay of the land to remain in cover, and crawling down a draw I saw them, 100 yards off, out in the open. trying to shift to react to the peppering small arms fire of a scout squad of mine. And man, there is nothing else like it. Fire and reload, fire and reload, fire and reload. Shell casings littered the underbrush, my rifle smoking. We dined on marvelous cuts that night. An early gunfight can net you about $1,000, plus some trade goods and maybe some scavenged equipment. But replacing a downed soldier with a basic, no-frills rifleman can cost 6 Gs, so keeping your men alive is incredibly important. If they die, you don't always recover their gear. After a few gunfights, begin the process of recruiting more followers, organize them into squads, and start building momentum. Gear requires a substantial outlay of cash. It's hard or impossible to remove your cash flow from violence. There are other sources of revenue in the game, but nothing is as effective or as satisfying as gunfights. The game is clearly anchored to that idea. Whatever money you do make is going to be cobbled together into buying passable equipment for your people. And this is the absolute best part of the game. I've talked about gear fetish before, and this game does it better than any game I've played since Jagged Alliance. My favorite thing in Jagged Alliance isn't the combat, it's the combination of gear fetish and logistics. Upgrade your handguns to rifles, upgrade your jackets to body armor. Each piece of equipment fills a role, and each kind of equipment has a tier. Don't neglect your deployable items, smoke grenades, frags, and first aid kits. I lovingly micromanage my squads. I try my best to ensure that my men are correctly outfitted. I spend way too much time on this, but it's one of the best avenues you have to create force multipliers in this game. Weapons increase your lethality, armor increases your survivability. It's an absolute joy to watch your t-shirt-clad farm boys cobble together random bits of armor and camouflage until they begin to resemble actual soldiers. You're an upper-class desk jockey, well protected by legal privilege. Your boomer fupa drank up your penis years ago in the same way the seas swallowed Atlantis. After a long lifetime of hoarding resources, you've bought a rifle to defend them. Now, after buying their first rifle, while alone, despite their absolute lack of training, every middle-aged dad in America secretly refers to himself as an operator. Nothing fills a male so thoroughly with undeserved confidence as owning a firearm. Give your steel a girl's name. Tell it your troubles. Anything to feel big again. Fire returns to your eyes. Suddenly, your opinions carry more conviction. The world is divided into distinct classes of those who understand, and those who would separate you from your power. Much like an airsoft player, these LARPerators go about the business of completing the illusion. A global supply chain of exploited laborers can bring this gear to you quickly and at low cost, where it can sit in a closet until the nylon decays. Tactical pants with a stretchy waist, size 42, Condor plate carrier, AR-500 steel with trauma pad, shemag, tactical gloves, bonus points for a mechanic's brand that have never done a day's labor, goggles, like in Black Hawk Down. Is that a fucking silencer? That's a fucking silencer, isn't it? Assault bag, a bunch of tactical pouches, holster, a belt, a sling. This shit's expensive. But because the men who break strikes have their own unions, you better come correct. Don't neglect your first aid kit. It's a little cheesy, but to cut costs, my wife supplemented my first aid kit with some essential oils. I don't know, I sort of believe some of that. I do know there's a mineral that helps you resist the rise of fascism. It's lead. Equipping your own squads is fucking awesome and equally expensive. But you're a smart boy, and you understand the devil's language. Math. So bypass the marketplace and start to gamble with every nickel you own. By adding up the total value of the board, you will realize that the average tile will yield money. This is how I was able to outfit my early squads with light machine guns. Go nuts. Grow your lethality. Build momentum. Awaken Shai Halud and unleash your jihad. It dawned on me here, and I don't want to use this channel as a venue to be some kind of social justice warrior, because I'm a social justice operator. But where's all the black people? I think I saw a Latino and maybe even an Asian. And while I'm thrilled with the inclusion of women, it's a super cool bit of representation, it's implemented slightly incorrectly. Gender is expressed as part of a unit type. You have male villagers and female villagers, bandits and female bandits. And while there are female elite troops and the all-female Valkyrie army is super cool, it serves to express gender as a qualifier, and that's kind of awkward. I would think that all troops should have some uniformly distributed probability of being either gender, and that shouldn't influence stats or cost. Women literally work for less in this game. This brings me to my second point, and this is an even smaller point. I get why this was done, but the female soldiers are way too sexy. The fetishization of armed women is super greasy and totally fucking hot. But much like a bar at a gun show, an awesome thing can go bad really fast. It's less about this, and more about this. So cool. Oh yeah. Total hottie. Remember, comrades, perky tits come and go, but 300 confirmed kills are forever. This game favors the patient, and while you can run in guns a-blazing, I've never been able to make it work for me. Unless you are the Kwisatz Haderach, it's difficult to be both places at once, to tactically command and contribute meaningfully to combat. What makes fights interesting is that there's a tactical procedure to them. While your options are limited when you only have a single squad, as you get your third squad, you can start to focus different units on different battlefield roles to support your tactical plan. And this is a review, not a how-to, but everyone needs to understand some fundamentals. The different kind of units available will inform your strategy. There are so many different unit types, too many to go over here, but in general they all fit an archetype. There are 3 or 4 unit roles which can be combined into a lot of different squad types. Yes, all squads can use any kind of weapon, but I guess there's some sort of preference. Line infantry, through judicious application of suppressing fire, their job, you guessed it, is to hold the line. Assault troops are your QCB specialists. These dudes get your best armor and only the finest grenades. Their job is to break the line. Snipers are highly effective killers if properly positioned and covered. I often include a 4th job type here. This is where I park my fucking new guys. You can have a lot of fun organizing your squads in fun, sexy ways. Just make sure they make sense. Combining assault troops with line infantry can create a variable fire and maneuver unit. Combining your assault troops with snipers tends to expose the weaknesses of both units without leveraging their benefits. So, one of the most annoying things is when dudes sit back and play armchair general. It's something fundamental to the male ego toxicity or whatever you want to call it, but it's one of the lowest forms of navel gazing. It combines our love of history and violence and introduces us to the narrative with clever phrases like, "Oh, I would have done this," or, "What do you think would have happened if..." It's the height of virtue signaling nonsense. We keep getting sucked into debates about Hannibal's tactics or Yamamoto's reluctant genius, or how the Harkonnen might have been more successful if they hadn't pissed off the wrong fucking dude. I'm going to try and not do that here, but it's still kind of tied to the game. And I'm not a tactical genius, even though I have seen Hamilton like 60 times, but I am pretty good at math. A train leaves Memphis traveling at 75 miles an hour, and every action has an equal opposite reaction. Assuming the enemy comes for you at the same speed, your forces will intersect here. Sure, they won't every time, but often they will. This is your danger zone. Direct assaults work perfectly fine if you have absolute superiority. At that point, you might as well auto-resolve and add another lie to your LinkedIn profile. The name of the game is to engage from multiple points of convergence to create a crossfire. Crossfires reduce cover and split the focus of return fire while limiting opposition's opportunity for maneuver. Line troops halt the advance here, everybody else flanks around, and then you use your assault troops to close in for the kill. When ordering your troops into combat, I highly recommend focusing on flanking maneuvers. Too bad Stannis Baratheon didn't read his Polybius, huh? What is he, fucking illiterate? Jesus Christ, flanking's been around since the fucking Jurassic period, and self-proclaimed tactical geniuses keep getting rickrolled by it like poverty-level Republicans simping for Trump. If you do not have numeric superiority, things get a little kinky. None of this is simple in the tactical map. Setting your troops to fall back after making contact isn't really effective. It's hard to set up hit-and-run tactics with Fog of War, and you don't want to assault too hard into a superior force that you can't see. My advice is to set tangential lines, so even if you encounter an enemy here or here, your retreat pathing is still functional. Ambushes are a fun, sexy tactic, but they're hard to set up. While you can do this just on the sand table, it's best to do this with a squad or two following you so that you can control the retreat to your strong points. Say, here and here. Terrorist camps and city assaults are super cool. Unfortunately, I suck at them. They tend to turn into horrific meat grinders. But keep units in reserve, spread your attack out. Do not enter the city until you've made solid engagement from a distance. When you do make contact, the gut reaction is going to be to reinforce your position. Unfortunately, you're probably already outflanked at that point, and throwing more troops at the problem isn't going to end well. Fall back, move orthogonally. Tactical command isn't perfectly implemented, and I can't tell if it's deliberate or not, but I really enjoy what's happening. The tactical interface is simple, but really challenging to master. It's hard to unfuck a fight on the fly, and it puts a priority on planning. It certainly feels like what I would imagine the confusion of combat to feel like. It's that little tone of realism that adds a lot to the game. Otherwise, it would just be an especially shitty RTS, huh? As my underdog status began to evaporate by mid-game, the lack of actual guerrilla tactics really started to become noticeable, which for a game called Guerrilla is kind of a problem. There's a few lines in Hamilton that I keep coming back to. The strategy behind asymmetrical warfare requires a consideration of your opponent's vulnerabilities in atypical theaters, and this isn't well expressed in this game. There's no morale-influencing tactics, there's no alignment with ideology that influences your alliances, resource pool, or recruiting options. There's no conflict between morality and pragmatic military necessity. There's no targeted killings. Yes, you know about George Washington at Yorktown. Much like Muad'Dib using his massive dong to smash through the shield wall with his wild Fremen in tow to deliver a poignant ultimatum to the Harkonnen. Ride the worm. Yes, full marks to General Washington. It was tactically well executed and strategically sound, and was a masterpiece of execution and combined forces at a time not really famous for coordination. And I'm overstating the importance of this to serve my argument, but the war was basically won in 1778 when a Scottish murderer named John Paul Jones invaded England to burn a ship in harbor. While his terroristic plot ultimately failed, as did the subsequent kidnapping attempt, his crew did successfully steal a tea service. This attack demonstrated the British vulnerabilities across the Atlantic and pulled a disproportionate amount of resources away from America to increase security back on the British Isles, raised insurance premiums for trade, increasing costs across all of the British Isles. The war was immediately unsustainable. Oh shit, am I doing? Shit, I'm doing, sorry. As you move into mid-game, this game stops feeling like a guerrilla simulator and more like military contractor tycoon, which is still pretty neat. And this efficiency is also true on the tactical map. See, while it's still highly enjoyable, the game works on the back of Mount and Blade logic. In melee battles, occupying terrain was very important, but when you're talking about a squad armed with rifles that can cover 400 plus meters of ground, the battlefield should become a little more complicated, and unfortunately in Freeman, it starts to feel a little two-dimensional. See, there's a lot more pressure on a modern battlefield. In a battlefield dominated by ranged infantry, the different roles are meaningful. Attack means something different than defend, and assault is different than a probe, which is different than a reconnaissance, and I'm trying to thread a very specific needle here. This criticism isn't about authenticity, it's about drama. See, drama comes from scarcity and pressure. Some of my favorite moments in Jagged Alliance were spent desperately trying to find a first aid kit before troops bled to death. But different battlefield jobs and roles could become really interesting in this game. There's no medevac to retrieve your wounded personnel, there's no technical experts, no engineers to pull out IUDs, there's no fire support spotters, no recon, no sappers. Even a logistics and resupply operation would be super dramatic. Having a squad run out of ammo while holding a critical flank that required you to send a resupply operation to support them would just be super intense and satisfying. A few different job types here and there would really make the game feel a little more dynamic. And in no way is this a negative, it just fits into that area of underdeveloped more than a criticism. The assumption of perfect supply is also a little awkward sometimes, but having limits on what equipment is available to you would make things feel a little more systemically like you were in a guerrilla war. And in general, the enemy AI could be a lot more tactically competent and strategically dogged, and have access to resources that you simply don't, like artillery strikes or carpet bombs, cruise missiles, drone attacks. Before you take your first city, I highly recommend that you begin the incredibly tiresome process of recruiting companions. This part of the game is unfortunately tedious, and you spend too much time on each character you recruit. While this time spent is absolutely justified by the contribution on the battlefield, it lacks some of the charm of Jagged Alliance.
You're a lying member of a no-good race.
Companions really only perform the one function of bringing allied armies to a fight. And it's critical, but it's missing some dimension. Before you assign them to lead their own troops, make sure that you level them enough to be able to lead an army of at least 100 men. Your cash flow begins to stabilize as your army gains credibility. Quests become accessible, and you can make a decent living off them. Fetch and courier quests are stupid and boring. Your bread and butter is going to be knocking out bandit outposts. Mob hunts are interesting, but time-consuming to a level that isn't justified by their reward. The quests in Mount and Blade are just better and more interesting. The margin on trade goods is too low compared to what you can earn just by murdering world mobs. I mean, I guess you can trade if you want to roleplay. It's just too time-consuming to really be interesting. There is one exception, gold. If you ever find gold at a discount, buy it, smuggle it to the terrorists, and enjoy a golden shower. Bounty hunting is the motherfucking jam, and it's the best way to go. It helps that it's completely broken. Find two armies in a fight. Join the fight and contribute as little as possible. If you're able to take prisoners, for some reason, you will often take some of your allies' elite troops captive. Sell them back, and get paid with stacks on stacks on stacks. You can net 100 grand in a single fight from selling elite captives back to your allies. Your new access to wealth is very welcome. You can level up your troops, recruit better troops, and commit more resources to their equipment. Little things like camouflage and night vision goggles start to become important. Specialist squads start to become necessary as you focus your army. And here you have a decision. While your army is credible enough to start your conquest and your cash flow is normalizing, you can begin your conquest or you can forsake the path to king. This latter option allows you to linger in the early game, where the game is the strongest, and avoid all the negative parts of the strategic map. It's so much fun, I highly recommend this path. You can even defy expectation and become a bandit yourself. Now, you are destined to take on the path of Conqueror, so eventually you're going to have to do it. This part of the game is where it's the most vulnerable, and while I'm going to shit on the game for the next several minutes, it doesn't discount any of what I've previously said. The strategic side of the game opens up when you begin taking territory. And it's not boring, it's just much less interesting. Once you've seized the means of production, the game is effectively over. The only real choice remaining to you is if you want your industry to produce guns or Panama hats. Capturing your first few cities is disappointingly easy if you were even slightly prepared, and this move forever ties your grassroots movements to capital in an unholy union. But if you followed my advice and have even a few modestly high-level companions, what comes next should be nothing short of a fucking bloodbath. City management is interesting and does provide you with something to do, but with your new cash flow, your industry will never be able to supply your armies as readily as you can yourself just by buying what you need off the open market. Actually, because you don't have to pay upkeep on garrisoned armies, I really don't bring a lot of troops with me unless I'm actively sieging cities. Your allied troops end up doing most of the heavy lifting, so save your cash. You'll spend most of your time wandering the map looking for production goods to upgrade your city's infrastructure. This is best achieved by farming world mobs, so the game takes an awkward step back for a while. Managing your industry is pretty cool for the first few cities, but it doesn't scale well and takes you out of the fighting. The strategic trade mechanic is unique and kind of interesting. I don't fully understand it, something to do about selling your supply for demand. I guess it's pretty neat. The alliance system is okay. I don't know, it's hard to invest in. I don't have any bitter rivalries or ideological differences with the other factions. Conquering the map is actually the most tiresome and least interesting part of the game. After a week of hesitation, you'll start to auto-resolve battles, only to discover that auto-resolve was a more effective general than you ever were, which kind of undercuts the point of the game. It's like blacking out in an alley. You just have to trust the process. Now that you have good access to money, territory, and armies, you'll start wandering the map. Basically, you need a lot of stuff. Recruits for garrison armies, weapons, and building materials for town expansions, and you can't get the quantities you require in one place. Plus, you have to hit all your towns to collect your taxes. It just kind of slows the game down without making it more interesting. Deaths are casually replaced with nearly infinite recruits. Armor and gear purchases stop being so attentive, not for lack of love, but because it doesn't scale well. You have nearly limitless money, so the drama of scarcity disappears. Anyway, you'll eventually catch up on chores and conquer your island. And after all that hard work that goes into setting up your regime, a clandestine force with a sudden mania for a free and open democracy invades. The Alpha Force invasion absolutely feels tacked on, but the truth is, this is the first part of the game that actually feels like a guerrilla war. You'll be outnumbered, outgunned. It's actually pretty intimidating. Territory will be lost. There are so many of them, and they represent a real incredible threat. I mean, for like a week tops. Mostly they fuck around and wait for you to pop a cap at them. It's like the third act of Twilight. The dramatic tension is already all dissolved. Mobbing up your companions into a hammer allows you to smash everything that opposes you with simplicity. It's just a little tricky to time your battles right. This is about geometry and not about strategy. And at this point, it's really just a war of attrition where you have all the initiative. By this point, your character should be pretty much maxed out. And instead of taking a break from the fighting to sell your prisoners and recruit replacements, just recruit your prisoners. To maintain compliance with the Geneva Convention, don't classify those raiders as prisoners. They're motivational speakers. Not every game needs to be the same, and I really enjoyed the hell out of this game, but where this game falls short is that in places it's too derivative of Mount & Blade and Jagged Alliance without achieving what they did. Most critically, this is the political access tier of the game. In Mount & Blade, even becoming powerful enough to become a vassal took political jockeying. Simultaneously, your vassals suffer from being two-dimensional. Power and political strength shifted in Mount & Blade, and it's happened here too, but it's impossible to form relationships that are in any way interesting, even if they are tactically useful. Companions don't even really need to be the turned up to 11 awesome characters from Jagged Alliance, but you gotta give me something. Tactics are interesting, but lack some dimension. In Jagged Alliance, you can build different squads with different MOs to accomplish different objectives. Stealth, assault, explosives. And the strategic world is too flat and static to really engage in any guerrilla war. There's just not enough there to really scheme on. Different villages could do different things, and occupying them or destroying them could have a battlefield impact. Like this could be a power plant, this could be a hospital, this could be an oil refinery. Targeting trade caravans could weaken your opponent in other ways. I don't know. I have literally several ideas. But 4X games have been doing this for decades, and Freeman needs at least a little of this. The narrative layer of the game is absolutely absent, and aside from an awkwardly titled Muslim-derived antagonist nation, there's not like a ton to go on about who your opponent is or why you have the moral authority to destroy them. Some larger quest lines would be cool, more interface with world players, some kind of intermediary territory would be nice, like training camps or something. The enemy AI is weak, they lack aggression both tactically and strategically. After a certain point in the game, there aren't really any interesting tactical challenges. Enemies just feel like speed bumps as opposed to capable adversaries that are motivated to destroy you. From day one in Mount & Blade, absolutely everybody is trying really hard to fuck you up. People who know how. This is a question of initiative. The AI is reactionary and doesn't work against you, it just kind of exists for your predation. And that's not to say that this is a negative review. The game is fantastic, it's good fun. After hundreds of hours in this game, the implementation of a few of these ideas would make this game something its parents could be proud of. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more content. You can support this channel by purchasing and reading my novel. It's fantastic.